do you all believe that large, like 15 plus person teams of software engineers and QAs will be reduced down to teams of 2 because of the AI tools that are emerging?
Yeah.
And you guys are both former SDET, so this is interesting because everybody that's watching is listening. There is a little bit of commonality between Scott and Michael's background. One time they were both in SDET roles where they were automating things that would have been manual testing or push button testing, and they were like, well, let's just script this, right? And they were actually both in the forefront of the SDET movement years ago. So yeah, what do you guys think when things like this pop up? Does it make our team smaller?
I think everybody needs to think of pivoting in general. I don't think anybody is immune 100%. You can be the best engineer in the world. You're not fully immune. I think everybody, all careers, and there's some mention about recruiters, there's some mention about QA software engineers. I think overall, everybody should have the mindset of pivoting, being able to be in a position to pivot in the next 1 to 2 years. Not
with proprietary vetted truth data. How do you designate the mass embedded text used to train the base model from the truth? And how do you minimize, prevent hallucination? So how do you train, I guess essentially, how do you train a model with data you want to train with versus the big overall models that is BARD or the ChatGPT?
Mm-hmm. Well, a lot of times the data pollution that comes with using a pre-trained model or foundation model that is trained on just open internet, everything, it's always going to have some sort of issue that creeps into your use case. And one of the things we specialize in Kung Fu AI is creating custom trained models that use only data that's useful or that comes from an organization that's generated by them, which generally would translate to something that's custom designed and for their use case. But on the topic of, I think Travis mentioned hallucinations at the end. It's a big concern, and there's an entire field dedicated to interpretability and explainability of these models. I think you're starting to see more and more models that are including attribution in their final predictions, where you'll get a response from ChatGPT or whatever the LLM is, but you also get a source reference where the information most likely came from, so you can go vet it and verify it yourself. But currently, there are no foolproof ways of doing it, and it's definitely a field of active research from our perspective.
So, I think the best thing overall, what I see is there are a lot of open source models that are popping up, and there's a lot of support to improve that. What that means is, because before, if you want to invest in AI and want to, as an enterprise company, you have to spend a decent amount of money with a team with good machine learning engineers with a lot of expertise. So you need to spend cash to implement AI in your product, in your company. With a lot of open source model, what I see is solopreneurs, entrepreneurs who have some idea in their head can do this themselves. So I think the cost of implementing AI, I think, will be lower on a smaller scale. A lot of people will be able to do it themselves with a lot of help from open source community. So that is what I see happening with this Hugging Face world, because they're not charging money. There's development happening kind of wildly in a lot of ways. But the challenge with that is coming from a test background, what I see as a challenge is a lot of these are not tested well. A lot of these models, like even I'm trying out a lot of ChatGPT plugins right now. It's breaking left and right. Like it's not working 50% of the time. There's so many issues. A lot of these things are just popped out without testing. So the quality of these products I see is not that good. Honestly, some of them are good based on how you use. So
but first off, it stands for natural language processing, and it's a field that's been around for decades and decades. But to me, NLP basically means the data that we're operating on, that we're trying to either predict something on or create some insights around, whatever the task is, we're just operating on text data, natural language. No, we're actually pretty open. Usually that's one of our core values, and we really try to stick to that. And we have a pretty strong belief in business karma. If we put good stuff out there, it'll come around and go around. But with our strategy practice, usually the first step is to go speak with the client, make sure first and foremost that we understand their problem, understand any immediate pain that they're experiencing, some frustrations, to see if there's any sort of aspirin, we need to try to prescribe as opposed to vitamins. I'm sure you've all heard that distinction there. But, after that, we'll either, if things seem just totally ambiguous, there's not really much more you can do other than having strategy. So for that, we'll go do subject matter expert interviews. We'll have, hour-plus long conversations with people at every point of the business. Anyone between, if it's retail, people working at the point of sale, all the way up to C-suite level executives. It's important to get a really holistic view about what everyone's experiencing. And that's also a consulting paradigm that's, not new with the advent of AI. And what we'll do is, the primary deliverable of these strategy engagements is to come up with a product roadmap that makes sure it's taking into account, the state of the art, what's possible. We really try to align both on ourselves and everyone internally at the, at the client site to make sure everyone's on the same page. We get buy-in on this product roadmap. Then usually what we'll do is we'll build just a small proof of concept that demonstrates that what we're saying we can do is possible. That could be looking at a list of, or a bunch of medical documents associated with patients and trying to come up with, what was the reason that this person was in the hospital, which surprisingly is hard to do if you have a giant swath of medical history. Or it could be something as simple as, look at this set of receipts for this consumer and try to figure out, based on their purchase history, what's something else they might like and, might find joy from. And then from then on, it's just a pretty limitless sort of deal where we just keep chugging away. And as long as we're demonstrating an ROI and a business benefit at every step of the way, there's no real limit to what we could help a business with.
I feel like the quality needs to get much better, especially Hugging Face open source. There's a lot of bugs. There's a lot of bugs I have found. I find bugs every day, like 20 of them. Maybe not in ChatGPT, but like plugins. Like I find so many use cases it's failing in. But everybody's just looking at what's working and ignoring what's not working. You cannot use this in the enterprise level if there's so many bugs. So my issue is I don't think the quality is quite there yet to use in a large scale level. But in a small scale level, a lot of free options out there in the Hugging Face world. So overall, I'm optimistic on the development. Hugging Faces, they're really leading it. It's just really wild how much they have support going on. Yeah.
Michael, have you heard much about Hugging Face, or have you guys played with any of the open source tools there?
Oh yeah, it's we use it regularly, if not on the majority of our projects these days.
Okay. And for folks that are listening to this or watching this right now, if you don't know much about Hugging Face, here's the really bad, cheap client history of Hugging Face for you. Okay. So if you been in tech for the past couple of decades, like I have, I'm way too old and been around this. This is similar to the Apache Foundation type.
I totally agree with you there. And I think something that's under the hood, you mentioned these enterprise, businesses have fewer bugs that they deal with. It's a more end-to-end functional solution that's reliable and robust. There's a paper that came out, I think a few years ago. I'm going to share a link just for fun in the chat here. And it's called Hidden Technical Debt in Machine Learning Systems. And there's a really important graphic on page 4 that I think just, picture's worth 1,000 words. Anyone, these solopreneurs that you're talking about, can take ChatGPT, can wrap it in something and build a prototype that seems really impressive pretty quickly. But when you start realizing that that's just such a small part of what's needed for an actual functional end-to-end long-term working solution, all the software design code robustness principles apply. You need CI/CD, you need good data engineering, a good infrastructure design. If there are relational databases, those need maintenance. All those things that sit in the orbit of this ML code are really important. And I think that's why when you're considering, who am I going to go get help with? What tool am I going to use? Not only looking at the performance of the tool, but taking into account the experience of that organization, like Microsoft, is going to be so important to help guarantee that whatever you decide to index on is going to actually benefit you in the long run.
I'll fear like I think it was the Samsung incident a few months ago where somebody dropped a bunch of proprietary IP into GPT, and all of a sudden they're telling the world about IP for their products. What's your guys' antidote for that one?
I think on our end, what we do is, because things are moving so quickly, we have an internal working group that meets weekly that just discusses, what's happened, how does that apply to the business, and what tools are approved for use, essentially. And the two things we've run into that are really big here are, proprietary data, as you mentioned, where, if you're using something like ChatGPT for individuals, they save your data on their servers, and then, that probably could violate some sort of company policy. And there's also the possibility of the content that you receive back might be violating some sort of copyright laws. So a great example there is GitHub Copilot. We've used it so far a fair bit. If you use Copilot for Business, they don't store any of your code on their servers. However, with Copilot as it stands, or at least last time we checked, there's no guarantee that the code you're getting back that's being predicted isn't violating some sort of license agreement on the code it was trained on. I don't know, Sakant mentioned there are some alternatives to there, but the both inbound and outbound privacy and security concerns are something to be mindful of.
What's this idea of a working group that can be looking at AI tools and evaluating them?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think so in our case, we have a group that meets weekly, like I mentioned, and it's multidisciplinary. It's pretty open invite. It's more of just a space for discussion. It is important to have leaders in the room to talk about it, because not only is it an opportunity to make decisions that might, create a lot of risk in the case of, copyright violations, for instance, but it's also an opportunity for leaders to learn and get up to date without having to spend hours and hours every day trying to keep up with the news cycles.